I've been working through the book of Ecclesiastes, looking at the basic development of thought in the book. We started out by looking at the introduction to the theme of vanity of all things. And we saw it illustrated in chapter 1, verses 1 to 11. Everything under the sun is fleeting, transitory, and the Kohelet illustrates that by looking at the constant change in everything. For example, how we look at people going off the scene and people coming on the scene. We look at all the rivers running to the sea, and yet the sea is not full, and yet it continues the same cycle. All things tend to toil to weariness. What has been is that which will be, and what will be has been done. And everything seems to be in a constant flux, a constant change. And yet there is a sameness as well. It is interesting, we gave a quote from Shakespeare: "All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts. His acts are 7 ages." And the point is, life is constantly moving, and we may go on the stage for a while, and then we're off the stage. And we had quoted that great hymn, "Abide with Me" by Henry Lyta. Swift to its close ebbs out life's little day. Earth's joys grow dim, its glories pass away. Change and decay in all around I see. O thou who changest not, abide with me. And we quoted that when we did the first chapter, the first 11 verses. Then we came to the vanity of human wisdom. How the more you know, the more sadness is there because you can't solve the riddles of life. You have a better understanding of life, but you can't really bring it all together. You have 7, you need 3 to get 10, but you can't find the 3, and so forth. And so he talks about how knowledge can bring a pain. Then he talks about materialism and pleasure, how that he sought all kinds of material gain. He planted vineyards and he built houses and he did all of that, and it all proved hevel, vanity, and a chasing after the wind. He then talked about how vanity, or how wisdom, though, is better than folly, but both are vain in that ultimately one dies, whether one is a wise man or a fool. And then he goes to talk about the vanity of leaving one's inheritance to another is uncertain, because you don't know whether the one you leave it to will do well by it or will destroy and everything that one has done. So he says, enjoy life. Enjoy life in one's toil. And this theme will continue to reiterate itself throughout the book of Ecclesiastes. Enjoy the simple things of life. Smell the roses and enjoy life in the way that you can, in the little things day by day. Now, we come to chapter 3, 1 to 15, how that there is a time for everything. It reads, "To everything there is a season, a time to every purpose under the heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up that which is planted, a time to kill, a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to get and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to cast away, a time to rend and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time of war and a time of peace. What profit has he that works in that wherein he labors? I have seen the hard travail which God has given to the sons of men to be exercised in it. He also made everything beautiful in his time. Also, he has set the world in their heart so that no man can find out the work that God makes from the beginning to the end. I know that there is no good in them, but for a man to rejoice and to do good in his life, and also that every man should eat and drink and enjoy the good of all of his labor. It is the gift of God. I know that whatsoever God does, it shall be forever. Nothing can be put to it, and nothing can be taken away from it. God does it, that men should fear before him. That which has been is that which will be. In other words, that which has been is going to come back. It's already been, and God requires that which is past. In interpreting this passage, he seems to be looking at life and how everything seems to have a certain timetable, and one cannot change it. So how do you live life in the midst of all that? You enjoy the moments, the small things in life, Kohelet says. To everything there is a season and a purpose to everything under heaven. He is looking at life and realizes that there seems to be a time for everything. A time to be born, a time to die. Everybody has that experience. Birth time and end time. There is a certain mystery in that regard, a time to plant then and a time to pluck up that which is planted. There is a planting time and then a harvest time, he observes. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to break down and a time to build up. Sometimes things happen to people in an accidental, premature way. There is a time to break down. You take a house that may collapse and you have to tear it down and build another up again. There is a time to weep and a time to laugh. In life, you experience the funerals and the weddings. In pastoring, you might experience both on the same day, a time to mourn and a time to dance. They would often mourn, for example, at funerals, perhaps for a week or so, and dance at a wedding. There is a time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. This has caused problems. Are we talking about someone coming into a land and throwing stones, then gathering those stones? Some even take that it is talking about the sexual act in marriage. The rabbis said there is a time to cast semen to beget children when the wife There is a time to cast semen and to beget children when the wife is menstrually clean. And there is a time to conserve the semen when the wife is unclean. It is difficult to understand this verse, and we are not exactly sure what the verse means. It could mean any one of these things. A time to seek there is, and a time to lose. A time to keep, and a time to cast away. Usually, when people are young, they are out seeking things like clothes and other products. Then, as time goes on, the effort is to try to get rid of as much as you can. You are not in a seeking mode anymore, but trying to pare down, and how true that is. A time to rend and a time to sow. There is a time to keep silent and a time to speak. There is a time when one rends the garment in sorrow, especially at a funeral or another sad time. Then there is a time to sew, to mend clothes and to make them fit for wearing. A time to keep silence and a time to speak. There are then times when one keeps silence and times when one needs to speak. There is a time to love and a time to hate, a time of war and a time of peace. There seems to be both things happening in life, both types of things. There are times when there seems to be conflict around the world, and there are times when there is no conflict. What profit is there then of he who works in that which he labors? The Kohelet says, I have seen the task which God has given to the sons of men to afflict them in it. He has made everything beautiful in its time. However, man cannot find out the work of God and that God has done from the beginning even to the end. There is a mystery. I think that he is saying there are all times and all these times of life that he has observed, and God, along with that, has set eternity in man's heart. And yet man cannot find and understand the work that God is doing. God has done from the beginning to the end what he is going to do, but one cannot fully understand it. The way I understand this verse is that we know that we are not creatures of a moment. We know, having been created by God and having put an eternal, immortal soul in us, that we are not creatures of a moment, but we are eternal. We are not limited by time, however. We cannot figure out God's timetable and all that God does, but we're not limited by time. Why do we have all these different times when we were born and have different life experiences? There is still a mystery to life that we cannot fully put together, the preacher is saying. Since we cannot know life's mystery, we are not limited by time, though, the Kohelet says. I now know that there is nothing better for them than to rejoice and to get pleasure as long as they live. He reverts now to the statement that we saw in chapter 2, verse 24, that we are to enjoy the simple things of life. He is not saying that we are to party all the time, but we are to enjoy the little moments of life that bring joy in the transitoriness of life and in the mystery of God's timing of the way that life is. As long as we live, we are to enjoy and smell the roses each day. Also, then, that every man should eat and drink, he says, and see good in all of his toil, I see that this is a gift of God. It is God's gift that we toil, but enjoy life in the process. The other day, a friend came over and brought Janet and I and myself a special treat of cookies and a beautiful dessert with that. We sat down and had a hot cup of coffee, and as we sat together, we enjoyed these moments of cookies and ice cream. That is what he is talking about. The simple things of life are to be enjoyed. Sometimes we overlook these in seeking other things that we think are greater. I say this, for I know, the Kohelet says, that whatever God does, it shall be forever. In other words, God is sovereign. There is a determinism, nor can anything be taken from it. You cannot add anything to it. You cannot subtract anything from it. God has done it that we might fear before him. We cannot fully understand God and what he is up to. What he does is going to be. Nothing can be added to it or subtracted from it. God does it that men should fear before him. And furthermore, that which has been done has already been done long ago. And that which is to be done, it also has already been done. I think he is coming back to the theme that everything is repeating itself. There is nothing brand new. God seeks after that which is pursued. In other words, he seems to be pursuing and bringing back what has been, like he is chasing after it to bring it back. What we are seeing now has already been. And furthermore, it looks like God keeps pulling up the past to repeat it again. He keeps pursuing and pursuing what has already been. In light of that, the preacher says, enjoy the moment. Enjoy a hot fudge sundae or a walk in the park as we do our toil. We cannot fully understand the way of life and the way it is in terms of time and how we fit into it or what God is doing. This is what the preacher is wrestling with. And I thought, as I read this, we need to enjoy the simple things of life, he is saying. The little things, like spending time with your family. I enjoy nothing more than spending time with Janet. And together we can go and sit in our car and look at a nice little sunset by a pond and drink tea or coffee. That's the joy of the moment that my wife Janet and I share together. I'm also thinking, as we go through life, we can know that even though we cannot figure out God's timing and how we fit into it, what we can do is be faithful to the Lord. Paul said that his desire was to know Christ and the power of his resurrection and the fellowship of his suffering. Jesus said, seek first the kingdom of God, and all these things will be added unto you. Mary had the better part, sitting at the feet of Jesus. And one of the most important things I think we can do as we read these very wonderful words of the Kohelet, true words, is to fear God and keep his commandments, as he'll say at the end, and also to know that our toil is not in vain in the Lord when we are serving the Lord. And as a Christian minister, that is what I see as I read this text and then read it through the lenses also of the New Testament.